Thank you, Denise. On behalf of the Trenton Board of Education, I welcome you to our TV radio broadcast on Trenton Talks. Thank you to our sponsors, WIMG 1300 AM and WPHY Verizon Channel 28. My name is Gerald Truitt. I'm your host. I serve as a board member for Trenton Board of Education. I chair the Family and Community Engagement and School Support Committee. I serve along with board committee members, Board President Addie Daniels Lane, and board members Denise Johnson, Yolanda Mileto Lopez, and Teron Tice. I also serve as chair of the Board Policy Committee and as a member of the Human Resources and Facilities, Buildings and Grounds Committee. Our other members, Jean Bowie is chair of the Operations Committee. Jeannie Weekland is chair of the Facilities and Buildings and Grounds Committee. And we are so happy that you are being a part of our broadcast today. We want to thank also Mr. James Earl, our superintendent, for his leadership, for his support, and his commitment to our school community. We want to introduce today our Business Administrative Board Secretary, Jane Howard, who will be discussing with us our budget guidelines and timelines for our district. I want to thank our co-host, Ms. Denise Crease, our parent coordinator and homeless liaison for Trenton Public Schools. I want to thank all of our attendees on Zoom Live and our guests who are with Trenton Public Schools Facebook Live page this afternoon. Welcome to our broadcast. Again, thank you to our sponsors, WIMG 1300 AM, 5-time Stellar Award-winning gospel station, and Verizon Channel 28. I want to remind everyone we're rebroadcasting on radio tonight at 7 p.m. on WIMG 1300am.com, on Thursdays on Verizon Channel 28 at 11 p.m. You can also catch our rebroadcast recording on Trenton TV, our YouTube channel. And of course, here live on our YouTube, on our Facebook channel, Trenton Public Schools. We have an exciting broadcast for you this evening with Jane Howard, our Business Administrative Board Secretary. So Jane, I wanted to just ask you a quick question. How important is our budget process for a school district? We're going to be discussing, I believe, our 21-22.
Well, we're discussing the 22-23
22-23
budget calendar.
Budget calendar, yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
Okay.
You said how important is our budget?
How important is the budget?
As you know, that is the fuel that drives everything for the upcoming school year. As I always state to the superintendent and board members as yourself, that you can have the best car in the world, right? You can drive a Hyundai, a Bentley, but if you don't have gas in the car, whether it's regular, premium, or supreme, it's not going to move. So the financial and the funding portion is the gas. So we have to always ensure that we know the instructional goals and priorities and the strategic plan, so we're able to fund those initiatives and move that initiative along. So with that being said, the budget calendar is the guidance that shows you, well, this is how you should budget for the upcoming school year. Okay, for those who don't know who I am, I know Mr. Truitt introduced me. My name is Jane Howard, and I am the Business Administrative Board Secretary for Trenton Public Schools. Today, I will be giving you a brief overview of the statutory requirements and the dates that is mandated from the state of New Jersey in preparing a budget calendar. That is a very important tool because that calendar allows you to see what needs to be done. What are the specific goals that are daily, monthly, and tasks that need to be done to create a thorough and efficient education for our students, okay? It's our primary tool. So Denise, if you can move to the next page. Because we are a type 1 district, which is 11, I believe, in the state of New Jersey, and we're one of them, with an appointed board, our budget is approved by the Board of School Estimate, right? The tax levy. So with that being said, by March 4th of every year, our budget needs to be sent to the county superintendent for approval and adjustments. That's mandatory for any type 1 school district. And then submitting that proposed budget will give us the a chance to back map and say, okay, these are all the items that need to be in place before we can submit that budget. Have it advertised in a local newspaper and submit it for our public hearing. So in July 2021, as we know, that constitutes the beginning of a fiscal year. And what does that mean? July 1 through June 30th constitutes a fiscal year. And in that, in July, we also have to prepare an estimated fund balance, right, for the 2021 audit, which was for the prior year. And then that will give us the fund balance that will go into our 22-23 budget, which is very important. That's the excess surplus. That's a very important number that will go into our budget for the 22-23 school year. So in October, we start conversations on redistricting with the leadership team and with the superintendent. And you know, Mr. Earl has already taken that show on the road, and he's met with the public in different schools. I believe it was Kilmer, Dunn, and I believe it was Martin Luther King. We've also had our 4x4 meetings with our board members on the redistricting plan that should be approved in December of this year. And we met with our principals to give them an overview of the plan. That was all done in October. And all of these initiatives will help with preparing a mock budget so the board and the superintendent can see exactly where we are, because our state aid funding does not come until the end of February. But we still have to do an estimate so we can ensure that we're in pace and on point with all of our initiatives. In November, we still met with the public on a redistricting plan. We reviewed the budget calendar, which is what I'm reviewing now with the public, with the operations committee. And we started conversations about non-negotiable staff. Which staff is non-negotiable? As we know, our teaching staff, our principals. So we're going to start those conversations, program course eliminations, additions, and program evaluations to ensure that all of our programs that we have in place, we've evaluated and know that they serve the purpose, the intended purpose, when we budget for that particular service. December, which is tomorrow, we'll distribute our budget guidance to our leadership teams, and they'll see which portion they're responsible for as far as instructional support and the budget portion and enrollment. The board will approve the redistricting plan in December. After the board approval, we will then send a facilities change form to the state so we can ensure that all of our schools that are K-3, 4-6, and 7-8 are put in the state's donut with the intended purpose of just utilizing that particular group. Because now we have our schools in, say, a grant is K-5, but for the upcoming school year, it will be 4-6. So we have to make sure the state is aware that we've changed the structures of our schools, and we will start conversations on procuring services for all of the different services that the superintendent, board, and our assistant superintendents would like to utilize in the upcoming school year. So that's all in December. So as you see, this is a very aggressive timeline, but we have to make sure we meet this timeline, as I keep going back to ensure that we get, first of all, investment in our students, and to make sure we don't miss any of the budget parameters that was set forth by the board and the superintendent. In January, we will present the instructional guidance and the budget guidance to our principals, who in turn will meet with their school leadership teams to coordinate with their school improvement plans and the budget priorities and the instructional guidance, so we can make sure that they prepare a budget that is aligned to the superintendent and the board's goals. So that's very important also for our staff members, teachers, paras, custodians. Everyone should be involved in that's on the SLC involved in the budget. That then will be turned over to the superintendent and the business administrator. Denise, we can go to the next page. I think we're still in January. Is this the second? Okay. So in February, leadership will meet with the principals and administration on the budgets. There'll be face-to-face meetings. And what our superintendent would like to ensure is that their budget is aligned to the strategic plan and the instructional guidance. So there'll be face-to-face meetings where each principal and their school leadership will defend their budgets. Then from that, we'll have our budget revisions, and then we'll meet with the board again, have 4 and 4 sessions about the budget and all of the instructional parameters that were put in place, all of our facilities plans, any negotiations that we had, spending growth limitations, technology, human capital, our program offerings, everything will be placed in that budget before it is submitted to the executive county superintendent. And as I said earlier, March 4th is the deadline when our budget shall be uploaded to the county, no exceptions. So with that being said, and because we're a type 1 district, then we would have our budget presentation that the board will approve. And then we will have our board of school estimate meeting because we are a type 1 district. So the BOES committee, which is the mayor and 2 city council members, superintendent, and 2 board members will approve then the tax levy. And it has to be done between March 24th and March 29th. So you see, we're doing it on March 29th. And from there, after everything is approved, leadership will start preparing their RFPs and their bids for the different vendors and consultants to come in to provide the particular services that we're going to utilize for the upcoming school year. And then our meetings will start beginning. We begin with our unions on staffing, which will be done by the executive director of HR. And I'm sure the superintendent will be involved in the BA also. And we will also prepare our cash flow for the summer because we are a type 1 school district and we depend on the city to support us during the summer months. We have to ensure that we have cash flow for our ESY and our summer school work, which is not a problem because we get our first allocation September 8th. And then from there, we make sure that we're on point with just, you can go to the next page, please. We're just making sure that we continue to have conversations with staff, set up a walkthrough with the county business administrator, because we are opening up new schools. Remember, we're opening up Cadwalder, I believe, Robeson, West, and Stokes. So we have to make sure that we have a walkthrough with our county business administrator so he can see that our schools are up to code, which they are. We'll meet with principals concerning summer maintenance projects. And we still will make sure that all of our requests for proposals and bids were submitted to the purchasing office. And then after that, we'll just continue to have conversations with staff about the budgets, with board members and so forth, to make sure everyone has a clear understanding of our budget to lead us into May 15th, which is when we give all of our non-tenured and tenured teaching staff their contracts. And 16th then is our first regular board meeting of the year. So that's basically, it's a lot, and it seems like it's not condensed at all. So from really October up into March, we really are on a very short time frame, and we don't receive our actually state aid allocation until the end of February. So we're really just doing mock budgets up until that point, till we get the actual revenue numbers. Then once we receive that, I believe we have a week until we're really then preparing the budget. But that is the statutory timeline. It is nothing that at this point that we can do to change that, but to make sure that we're doing a lot of our work up front, so we can make sure on the back end that we're ready to present a budget that the community and our board members and parents, most importantly, that our will support our students.
That's a great overview, Jane. It does seem condensed, but it is a lengthy process throughout the year. And I just wanted to ask several questions, and I'm not sure, Denise, any questions in the chat, or not in the chat necessarily, but on the Facebook Live. Please check there as well. But Jane, could you give us an overview of overall revenues? Just how big is Trenton's budget in terms of dollars?
Well, as far as dollars, the actual budget is around $300 million, right? And I'm not counting the ESSER 2, ESSER 3, because we received another 44 million from ESSER 3. I think it was 20 something million from ESSER 2. So as far as our regular budget, which is our local fair share, I believe we receive about 23 million from there. And then the state, who really funds our district, it comes to about $300 million, which seems like a lot. But if I had a money bag and I would take it down and say, okay, but then salaries and benefits is what percentage? Out of district tuition is what percentage? Charter schools is what percentage? And look at all of our other benefits, which has nothing to do with the health portion. What percentage is that? So then you really see, oh, we have that much left. And that's the amount that you need to make sure that's spread it throughout our little people who don't have a union contract, to ensure that we are servicing them.
So I mean, out of a $300 million budget, the city provides about 23 million of that budget.
23 million.
Which is roughly what, maybe 15% of our overall.
It's about 7 or 8%.
7 or 8% of our overall budget.
Right. Because we do understand that the city is on municipal overload, and there is a formula for that. And we know that they provide us what they can, because we are type 1, and most of our money comes from the state. But because of the new funding formula that's in place, and I don't want to say we have not received our fair share, but it's what the state believes is our fair share. If it wasn't for that, our budget probably would be much more, maybe 400 million or 450 million. So I believe we do a good job in looking at, okay, this is the amount of money we have, and then this is the amount of money that we need to spend on certain items to ensure always that we're looking out for our students, to ensure that all schools are budgeting with the unique blend of students in that building. Mm-hmm. And that's the key. It's, you don't give an amount per building. I don't say, well, Stokes, you're getting. No, you get the amount per the unique blend of students in your building. If you have bilingual population, SPED population, and regular ed, you look at your data and you say, this is what I need to make sure each student can be supported 100%.
Can you describe? You talked a lot of educational and finance language that some folks may not understand. And for example, when you say type 1 versus type 2 school districts, can you give us a summary of the difference between a type 1, type 2, and just kind of give people an idea of what that means? Because I think folks may have that, maybe not understanding exactly what that means.
Sure. In the state of New Jersey, I believe we have 569 districts, 569 or 570 school districts. 11 are type 1. Trenton is one of the 11. And that means a type 1 district means three things. You have an appointed board. Type 2, you have an elected board. In a type 1 school district, there's no debt on your books. Type 2 school district, which is Lawrence, you can go out for a referendum and a bond. We can't. We have to go through the city for them to bond something for us. And thirdly is what? We have a board of school estimate, a BOES, which is the mayor who runs that meeting with 2 city council members and 2 board members. Whereas type 2, the public votes your budget up or down. With us, it's the board of school estimate.
And
So
on
that's
that
the
board-
difference between type 1 and type 2.
And it kind of in the not necessarily qualified, but to fine tune it even down a little further. At that BOES meeting, they're approving 2 budgets. They're really approving 1 budget. They're approving the budget, our operating budget, but then they're also approving any debt.
Tax, yes, but
in the tax
at that
levy.
time, which is outside of the budget because we can't include the capital project in our budget. So at that time, my facilities manager also gives them a facilities budget because we can put debt on our books, but we can give it to the city to say, would you vote this down or would you vote it up? And that's the resolution that we give every year for about $3 million to say, these are some facility items that we really need for you to work on, whether it's air conditioning, asbestos removal, whatever it is, we reach out to the city for that. If we were in Hamilton or another district, they can place that in their books or go out for a referendum. We can't do that.
And for example, one of the items recently on that table for the city to bond was our field, our
Yes.
turf field was one of the items. Other items was things like paving,
Asbestos removal, yeah.
asbestos removal. So just to give people an idea of what's bonded by the city, that's not necessarily part of our budget, but is also included as part of revenue we have coming in to support those various projects.
They normally give us, at one time they gave us at least $8 million a year. And now they give us about 3 to 4 million. And it depends. See, we go through a lengthy process because we first ask the state, okay, is this an emergent or an emergency? You know, if it's emergent, they will cover it. If it's an emergency, they say you need to do it, right? So then when we receive the denial letter back from the state, then we then send that to the city and say, okay, these are the projects that we need. It could be air conditioning in our schools, asbestos, paving, something as small as routine and required maintenance, we handle that, you know, which is lighting and things of that nature. But we look at the big things like the field. That was very important. That was, I think, 1-point-something million that we're working on that should be completed. That will be completed by August of the upcoming school year. So that was really a major task. They do a lot of our really like wiring, like at West School. They helped with the auditorium, which is doing very well, and the air conditioning in our congregated areas. But in each classroom, we would have to up the wattage, which PSE&G is still working on. Within 2 to 3 years, they're still working on that same issue because our schools are much older, right? So we can't just say put air in all the classrooms at West because they can't handle that. So in order for them to do that, they have to go in the neighborhood to make sure if they do that, they're not shutting down a neighbor or someone else's electricity to make sure we have air in our schools. So it's a long process, but I am happy that they are doing their due diligence to make sure that once it is completed, it will be completed.
Then Jay, I think that's a good segue into, you know, you talking about how you actually evaluate and make decisions around those facilities projects and what projects and how they get bonded. They have to be denied by the state first, and then they go to the city for bonding. And it's that same give and take with the operating budget. And you mentioned in your presentation about some of those fixed costs, like in our home, like we can equate it to some of our home fixed costs that we have in our home. For example, you mentioned out of district student placement. You mentioned charter schools, and you mentioned health benefits and salaries. Some of those costs are fixed, some are variable, some are fixed. but these are costs that we have to pay. And we can't get around not paying them, and they reduce the amount of money that goes actually into our school budgets.
Right. Most of our costs are fixed. Like during the summer months, we know we have to pay salaries. All of our 12-month employees, their salaries and their benefits, along with lights, right? Just like in your home, lights, gas, water. You have to make sure all of that is paid. I can't tell the water company, oh, I received my first allocation September 8th. Can you wait? No. And in a school district, you have to pay net 30. So when people say, oh, your bills are not paid, false. Our bills are paid, and they're paid timely because most of our costs are fixed. Now, you do have variable costs. We have our summer programming. They're variable costs, right, for the summer. So what we do is we have to make sure that we have cash flow. And what does that mean? Because people will say, oh, I have grant funding. Well, what does that mean to us? That's telling me that I need to give you a loan, because grant funding is a drawdown, which means that if you have activities in July, right, then the expense report has to be done by August 15th. Then that's sent to the state, and we might receive the funding from the activities you had in July in October, right? So then I have to have cash flow for everything that's going to happen in the summer, whether you have grant funding or not. It doesn't matter, because our teachers or employees who have signed up to work those programs expect to be paid on the 15th and the 30th. I can't say, oh, we're going to receive our first allocation on September 8th, right? So that's why it's very important that we know what are our priorities and what are the activities that we're going to have during the summer months, so we can then do our cash flow and say, we're good. Or we can say, you know what, we can do X, Y, and Z, but maybe we can't do, A, B, and C. So that's the way we look at that. And it's just like, it's funny because I look at Trenton's funding and monies more than I look at my own. Because I'm like, okay, if someone is not paid or if something happens, you have to answer for that. So I make sure that I'm always on top of what happens, because having EduMat, and you know about EduMat, as the accounting system, it's on a 45-day lag. So I have to make sure that I'm not on a 45-day lag, that I'm always 100% on point to know, okay, this is how much cash we have. So this is what we can spend. So that's very important to our viewers also, because I hear all the time, but that's grant funding. It's still,
you know what, Jay, it's like, people have to understand, I think, it's like two buckets of money, right? Two pockets, right. Two different bank accounts in a sense, not really, but in a sense, they're two different bank accounts. And I think you explained it very well, where it's almost like you have to outlay money in one bank account before you can collect it from another. And
I think
you gotta have the cash to do it in order to get that grant.
You have to have cash, right? And you
gotta
can't
have cash.
Credit, right? You have to have cash on hand. And also what I think viewers need to understand, that back, I think this was maybe before they changed this funding formula. Remember back, our funding formula was, say our achievement gap was here. So they gave us money on top of money on top of money, right? But then more money, more problems, right? Then they decided, okay, 2008, 9, 10, oh, no, we're not giving the former Abbotts any more additional money. Now it's going to be one size fits all, right? So you're going to get the same funding as everyone else, except for if you have at-risk students. So with that, all of us were at so during those particular years, it was tight because we wasn't used to this new funding formula. Now that prior, they would give us all of our grant funding in May. So I knew, oh, you have a grant? Your $5 million, your $6 million is going into the account. Well, they stop that so they can utilize our funding, right? And it's a drawdown, and we don't receive it until 60 days later. So if I don't have cash flow, then you're not going to be able to have your initiatives that you want. Denise, all your parents, initiatives that you have, and all these other things. So that's what people need to understand. It's not like I have that money sitting in my drawer. We have to know that we can meet all of the superintendents and the board's priorities for the summer.
Thank you. Wanted to shift gears a little bit here. Do we have any announcements for our listening viewers and our TV viewers? Denise?
Well, I have an announcement. We're hiring bus drivers. Is anyone available?
Go ahead, Jane. That's right. Got them. Matter of fact, we had Kelly Educational Services on a few weeks ago, and we were sharing with the community about our needs and the fact that they can come in and apply aides, bus drivers, bus aides, paraprofessionals, substitute teachers, and so forth. I believe that that's still an opportunity for our city residents and others who are interested to come work, and there's opportunities to work in the district. Denise, do we have any additional announcements for?
We sure do. So parents, you heard it. They're still hiring for bus aides and one-on-one. So please look out for the application process so that we can get some more bus drivers and bus aides. All right. So we are still continuing our vaccine clinics. So every Monday at Kilmer Elementary School from 4 to 7, if you're interested in getting vaccinated, that's at 1300 Stuyvesant Avenue. On Tuesday, if you're interested in getting vaccinated, that's being held at Rivera Middle School from 4 to 7 at 400 North Montgomery Street. On Wednesdays, the clinic is being held from 4 to 7 on 400 Chambers Street. On Thursdays, you can go to the Medical Home Pharmacy or the Cure Arena, and that's from 9 to 5, or the Trenton Deliverance Center from 4 to 7, and that's at 1100 South Clinton Avenue. Also on Fridays, you can go to the Medical Home Pharmacy, and that's at 828 North Olden Avenue, or the Trenton Farmers Market from 10 to 5 at 960 Spruce Street. On Saturdays, if you want to get vaccinated, you can go to the Medical Home Pharmacy from 10 to 5, and that's 828 North Olden Avenue, and then at Trenton Fire Headquarters from 9 to 1, 244 Perry Street. So if you're interested in getting vaccinated, and vaccinations are now available for children ages 5 through 11, and the Pfizer, wonderful. Yes, and the Pfizer vaccine is being offered to those children that are 5 from 11. Also, we are continuing our Parent Connection educational series. So parents that are interested in networking and meeting other parents and learning more about the educational school system and how to connect with community resources, I will drop the link. We're having a meeting this Wednesday from 5 to 7:30. We look forward to working with you. Dinner will be served, and we are following all COVID regulations. So that's all I have for today.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you so much. Jane, right back to you, Jane. Listen, Jane, it's this surplus thing. What is surplus, and how much surplus have we had and do we have potentially in our district, and how is it used in our budget process?
Well, there's a difference between surplus and excess surplus. So surplus, as you know, we can have up to 4%. It was 2%, but they raised it to 4%. Excess surplus is anything above that 4%. So which means it's a good thing and it's a bad thing, because it's saying you did not spend all of the money that was purposed for certain initiatives for that school year. But due to the pandemic in 1920, I believe we went out in March, and then for 2021, not coming back until May, I'm sure that June's budget, which is not due into June's audit, which is due in January, is going to show a heavy excess surplus because we wasn't here until May. But remember that excess surplus shall be budgeted for the upcoming, which is the 22-23 school year. So I'm looking at that to be, Gerald, about like 15 million, but it should be used for a one-time purchase. Not something that we can't sustain. Like, you shouldn't use that for salaries. No, one-time purchase, so we know we can sustain that. That's how you utilize excess, surplus.
One of the ways that I learned to use it also is in the terms is to pay down future costs.
You can do that, but it depends on how much time, you know what I mean, that you need to play down in future costs. But I always said whatever big initiative you're looking at, whether technology, whatever it is, utilize it for that. Because then you know, okay, you can have that initiative done, but you still have funding left over. Because a lot of times when we're looking at, you're asking some wonderful questions, Daryl, but when we're looking at the budget calendar, which is priority one in preparing a budget, that's number one in the planning process, right? The budget calendar. And it's mandated by law and CUSAC. So when you look at, okay, the budget calendar is first, but you also say, I need that educational plan, which I think that a lot of times, just people in general, especially our public on the outside and some industry people, they don't understand that a budget is intertwined. If the instructional priorities is not aligned with the budget priorities, then what type of budget are you doing? Because that's the blueprint, right? So if I don't have a blueprint, then how are you building the home? It's like you're building it from where? It's like have a navigation system and you don't know where you're going, right?
And that's why you brought in the program evaluations and how we have to evaluate the programs and make decisions based on what's working, what's not working.
And what's not working, or instead of just rolling over, which is what we do. Oh, well, you know, we had that 5 years ago. Was it effective? Did anyone do a program evaluation? Which is what our board asks all the time. Did anyone evaluate the program? You know, so I think now, as we're looking and managing our budgets a lot better, because you know, Gerald, budgets are very difficult to manage, especially in districts where we know we need to do more for our students, not just from an educational standpoint, but from a social and emotional standpoint. And I want to give Denise credit, because when I look on the agenda and I see all of the parent trainings that she has for, you know, our parents. Good thing my son is 23, because I'd be sitting in some of those parent trainings. And that's wonderful, because we're really looking at how we can really support the whole child and the family. So Mr. Earl, who's very in tune to budgets, is really working very closely with leadership to ensure that what we send out there, our product, is something that the community will be proud of and our kids will benefit from, which is the reason why we're all here.
One of the questions, Jan, I wanted to ask, you talked about in the process of the budgeting process, I believe you mentioned January, and how the principals and school improvement with their school improvement plans and aligning to the goals of the district and the goals of the school, how they get together. How are principals in the schools as leaders of those buildings involved once they get that budget and get those guidelines? How much are they involved in that budget process?
They are 100% involved, because their school budgets are their budgets. They have to take ownership, because the budgets are prepared by the principal and their school leadership council. Now, what we do in central offices, we say these are non-negotiables, which is what? You have to have a principal, you have to have teachers, you know, guidance counselors. These are non-negotiables. We tell them that, make sure they're in your budget, right? And then we give them the allocation through our data office. Okay, our structures are changing. So say, for instance, a school like Columbus, who's K-5, we'll give them the structure. Now you're K-3. You're going to have, say, five kindergarten classes for first grade. We give them all of that and say, we don't know who the teachers will be, because that's something that Jim, our HR director, will work with TEA with, right? Their leadership. But we can say, these are the salaries, right? These are the salaries. These are the benefits, because we know what everyone's benefits are. So we give them all of that. Then once they have that, all of the non-salary pieces, except for the Xerox machine and the cell phones, they basically look at the instructional guidance, because this is your curriculum. This is what you have to budget as far as making sure you have language arts, math, science, you know, all of the textbooks that you need, the consumables, the technology. So they have the guidance, and then they work with their school leadership team and also look at the data. What does your school improvement plan state? What does the strategic plan state? What are the superintendent priorities? So you have all of that in front of you, and that's the planning process. Then there's the preparation process, remember, and then there's the adoption, and then the board adopts it. But they do the planning and the preparation piece. And all of those circles in the middle is student achievement. So everything you do as far as planning, right? Preparation, then the adoption of the budget, then monitoring, right? And evaluation. But in the middle, you have our little people. So they're very, very involved in the process. And then our teachers are the closest ones to the students. So they're very involved also if they're on school leadership, you know.
And what you say, I mean, this year with the redistricting plan on the slate for December approval or final approval, we've already approved the overall plan to move it forward, but the final plan in terms of any changes that have taken place between last year and this year and through all of the community engagements that Mr. Earl has done with the community in various schools you mentioned earlier. So redistricting is going to take up quite a bit of time in this budget process. What do you think? I mean, it's going to be a little bit different this year in terms of
well, the budget structures will be different because we know, we always do mock budgets and we give them that. So we know, okay, you're K-5, okay, you're 7, 8, or you're whatever. But now we know, okay, you're K-3. So the principals will be used to getting K-5, they'll be receiving K-3 budgets. Some will be getting 4-6 budgets. Others will be getting 7-8. So that's why it's very important, Mr. Earl, his instructional team, who I consider, which is Joanne, Hope, Channing, Ortiz. Then you tell me, okay, these are the parameters. These are the things that should go into the budget. And we do that, pretty much give them that structure, that framework. These are the number of classes, but then everything else they figure out. These are the salaries, because you have to go by the union contract. These are the benefits. And then the non-salary piece all comes from the instruction office. These are things that you have to budget. What type of math series or, language arts, science, social studies, social and emotional, PD you're going to have, what type of vendors. So all of that will be given to them. And then they have to make sure it's placed in their budget. So then when we look at it and it comes before the superintendent and leadership, and we say, oh, okay, they did add all the components. Oh, they do have, the instructional information there. Oh, they did put in all of the, the math information or technology in their budget. So we do see overall that they're going to offer, a thorough and efficient education for their students. Now, some things are going to be unique just to that school. You know what I mean? But the good thing about this reconfiguration or redistricting, I want to make sure we're using the same language, is that everyone basically will have all the components, SPED, bilingual, and regular ed in our K-3 and 4-6 schools, which is very, very different from this current year where you went to different sites, Martin Luther King or Wilson or Mott, that were bilingual sites. Now, the majority of our K-3 and 4-6 schools will have all of those supports in their schools.
You need to look at it from a standpoint of a personal budget, a home budget, right? So you have your resource, which is your revenue and your money that's coming in. Then you have a framework of different categories that money has to be spent in. You have to pay you're going to pay your rent, you're going to pay your electric and utilities, you're going to pay your car note if you have a car loan, you're going to pay your credit card bill if you have a credit card, you're going to pay your grocery bill, you're going to pay for your clothing. And so these are all, and that's the framework that, in the simplest term we're trying to make, that's the framework that you are building for the schools. These are the buckets that
because these are your fixed costs, right?
That are going to sustain you and give you exactly everything you need. And then anything that's excess of that, I don't want to use excess, but anything that's not left over, but in the additional programs, there's money that remains in the budget for specific programs that address specific needs of students in that particular school, whether it be a K-3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9,
Yeah,
10, 12.
because every school has their unique blend of students in their schools and they know their data, right? But the good thing is at least we know that we're trying to bring most of the programs to the schools instead of having them bust across town. But we would like consistency in our schools as far as, art, music, those things, the simple things, art, music, with PE, which is mandatory, computers and those things. So it's almost like if they're at home and you fix your budget, okay, these are your fixed costs, non-negotiables. Now, these are the things that are variable, your variable costs, and you can look at how you can, then expand on what was given to you. And that's you knowing your data inside and out, so you'll know how to present that budget when it's time for you to defend it with the superintendent.
And so these guidelines we're talking about, these guidelines come from the state?
The statutory guidelines come from the state, which is saying, because when I do the budget, I back map. Okay, March 4th, I know the budget is due to the county with no exceptions. So if there's changes and adjustments, I know a good budget calendar should provide time for the board to review, understand, and make changes prior to the county adopting the budget. So I have to make sure that I then in meeting and Mr. Earl, the superintendent, with board members to say, this is what's going through. This is what will be uploaded on March 4th, which is a short timeline because remember, the governor does his address when the last week in February. So most of the time, what I'm going over with the board, right, is what? Is estimates as far as revenue. Because when we receive his allocation, I might have 3 days left to then prepare the budget. So I'm giving you guys an estimate.
Sometimes it's good news and sometimes it's not so good news.
And sometimes it's not. Now, if he's
sometimes
giving us
we get more money and sometimes we don't get enough.
But even when it's more money, it's bad. Yeah. Where is it going?
Right.
It's not like at home.
It's more, right. It's more planning.
I have a savings account over here. I can stick it. No, you still have to allocate that funding to an expenditure. And that's difficult too when you've already really prepared. That's why it's very important in the planning stage and in the preparation stage that what my office does is we also do mock budgets so we can kind of figure out, okay, where are we gonna be at? Where will we land? Because we got to do the administrator to student ratios, staff to student ratio, and all those ratios that the state are looking at. Make sure we already have that ironed out. And what's the word that no one likes to hear? The cap, okay? And to make sure that we're not over the cap.
Folks I think are beginning to understand. We can have many sessions on the budget process and all these things. We talked about CUSAC, and that's a whole session on
That's
CUSAC
a whole session by itself.
I mean, and you talked about caps. So there are limitations that the district has in how, where, and how much money is spent.
Absolutely.
And so it's not pie in the sky. It's really a process that is driven by the state, by statute, but also, of course, driven primarily by the needs of students and our community. And I just wanted to circle back to that surplus thing. And I mean, so folks to understand, I know we do because that's our business, but it's almost folks like when you're buying a house, you have surplus, you have extra cash on hand at the end of the year, or you've been building up this cash bank account to buy your house. That's kind of surplus. Would you say, Jane, in a sense?
Yes, but they really, but from a state standpoint, you shouldn't be building up excess surplus.
Right.
And that's where the disconnect.
Well, it's not excess, but not excess surplus, not excess.
The surplus, which is right.
You're building up your surplus 4%. To keep it at that 4%.
But most people live off the excess, right? Because you're looking at the way the state looks at that. Jane, your district purposed 350 million. Mm-hmm. So if you have, and we don't have 50 million left over, viewers, but if you have 50 million left over, then what did you purpose correctly? What happened? Did something not go well? So you got to be very careful because they look at that at the end like, okay, so what didn't you do? Was it aligned to students? Was it aligned to staff? Was it aligned to buildings? So you have to show all of that. And hopefully, no, it should never be aligned to students, right? They should have 100%. You know, at least I tell people 95%. So I don't let people order anything after March, because will it benefit our students? March, then you're saying April, May, will students receive the benefit? And that's what I always look at doing purchasing. Will our students benefit from that purchase if you're getting it in April, right? So try to do that in September, October, November, so we can ensure that it's no back order, right? Because then we have to answer for all of that.
I think you're what I hear you saying, I hear your heart, Jane, is plan out, you know, what the students need, and make sure it's ordered earlier in the year so that the students have the most benefit from it. And that even speaks to the fact that budgeting is not a one-year deal. Budgeting and process, it's all year. All year. You're projecting, you're assessing, you're looking at future budget, looking at past budgets, and all kind of strategies that we're working on. Would you say, Jane?
Forecasting all year, and just remember how you budget, right? How your budget is developed and implemented and evaluated, right? But people don't understand will not only contribute to the success of your goals, right? But it also can strongly influence the public appreciation for what you're doing, right? If you just throw it together, you can tell. But if you really step back and don't look at it as a bunch of numbers, but look at it as your budget story for your school, your budget expression for your school, then you will see things completely different. Where some people just look at numbers, it's not numbers. It should be a picture of what's happening at your school visually. You should see the instructional and the numbers. And that's the way you should look at it. Not, oh, these just a bunch of numbers. Then you're not looking at your budget plan correctly.
I mean, we look at our big picture items like in our strategic plan goals, which are the big ticket, the big global areas. Then we, of course, drill down to those specific areas within the schools and everything. Student achievement being one, community engagement and partnerships being our second, developing the whole child is our third strategic in our strategic plan, staff development and well-being, and facilities and infrastructure, resources, and safety. So those are our 5 key global areas that we look at. But from there, it's even broken down into specific things that we're focusing on in those 5 big ticket areas. Global areas.
Yes.
There was a question that came from Facebook from D. Jones. Where does the special needs children portion of the budget, where does that come into play?
The way our district is funded, they fund us with our regular ed, which is say elementary, it's about $11,000 per child. Then it's 1.7% for middle and another 1.17 for high school. Then they budget for our at-risk students, which they consider with free and reduced lunch. They look at that, any ELL students, or if you're both bilingual and you're ELL. Then they budget the SPED portion, which is per child, it's about $19,000 all across the board in elementary, middle, and high school. But the difference there is the state use their discretion to say, I believe that you're over, right, classifying students. So instead of giving you 100%, you may get, 14-point-something% of that. But that money comes in the same pot. But I know, okay, this is for all of our SPED students.
Jane, it sounds like the SPED is built into the budget and the process.
Oh, absolutely. When they send me the allocation, they say, this is for SPED, this is for bilingual, and this is for your gen ed students. Yes.
Thank you.
We had 2 more questions, and then that's out. She was talking about
Dee, we love her. Okay.
Basic
love you, Dee.
So she was looking at how can we budget for economics or basic economics in middle school if that's not already happening, and then how can that be allocated within the budget.
So when she's saying economics, I want to make sure I'm understanding her. What does she mean by economics? Because I want to make sure I'm
Yeah, I'm not sure because
correct.
it's not specified. I'm
Are you
assuming
filming
maybe
this?
home ec.
Is it personal finance?
So is
Maybe
it home ec, you think? Is it home economics?
maybe it's personal finance. Is it? Maybe she can clarify because personal finance is in the high school. We have that as a curriculum
Yeah,
item in
she's
the high
talking
school.
about middle school though.
Oh, in the
Yeah,
middle.
so what she's
right.
probably asking, she's probably looking at our high schools, which is our daylight and our main campus, and seeing the, they have small learning communities, which is the culinary and cosmetology and so forth. So she's saying, can they be expanded to our middle schools?
Yeah.
So that's something that I do believe that there has been conversation about that with our superintendent and instructional staff, that how can we bridge that so the kids will really know when they reach high school, which small learning community they really want to be in, because they've had that exposure. So we are looking at seeing how we can budget. Maybe those they're already in ninth. They get exposure in ninth grade, but she's saying, I assume 7th and 8th grade.
And then her last question is, how much money is allocated for charter schools?
Okay, great question. I believe in the 21-22 school year, it was about $44 million, which is to the tune of 3,000 students, because some of our charter schools really have expanded. Like, Pace was K-5, now they're K-8. Foundations was a K-5, now they're K-12. So all of our schools have expanded. And so we do pay quite a bit of money to our charter schools and our out-of-district schools.
What is our out of district over just a ballpark out of district?
It's about maybe $35 million.
35.
Because remember, the difference is charter school is dollar for dollar. What we pay for our students, we pay at charters. We're out of district, I could pay $100,000 per student to some of out of district schools. So that's the difference. Thank you, Dee.
That's all we have.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Well, Jane, I tell you, it's a great conversation. We're just almost at the tail end of our broadcast, and just wanted to give you some closing comments before we close out. And Denise, some closing comments before we close out. So I'll start with Denise, and then we'll close out with you, Jane. Denise?
No, thank you so much, Jane, for providing us with this additional financial knowledge of how the school budget works. I think it's really important for parents and community to be aware of how the system works, so that there isn't confusion down the road when certain things have to either be eliminated or added. And, it's important that parents are a part of this conversation, especially when it came to the redistricting. So thank you, Jane, and thank you, Mr. Trueheart, for providing so much information regarding this topic.
For me, I'm first of all, thank you for having me here, because I know I don't come too often, but during the budget time, I would like to be here more often and have parent training so they can really understand how we are trying to service and support their students. Because one thing we look at, I know I look at, because I have a child also, is to make sure that our funding go to our customers, right? And I know who our customers are, right? Our parents and our students. But as I said before, how we develop our budgets, right, is how the community will see what's important to us, right? So what's the key word? We respect what we inspect, right? So I make sure when we're looking at these budgets that we go through and we inspect everything that we've had the year before. Did it work? Did it not work? Is it critical? Is it not critical? Just like if you're going in a hospital, do you go to the critical ward, or are you just in the regular ward? So you look at that and you say, you want to give a product that everyone can be proud of. And that's what we strive for. And it's not separate and apart from the instructional program. They're intertwined. That's very important also. I don't sit in the room by myself and put together a budget. No, I get my information from the instructional team. And that's how we start crafting our budget.
Thank you, Jane Howard, our school
Okay.
business administrator, board secretary, our all-star business administrator and board secretary. Much knowledge and skill, and just love you. And thank you so much for being a part
Thank
of
you
our
for having me.
broadcast. Denise Crease, our co-host. Thank you so much, Denise, and managing our Facebook visitors and live guests. Appreciate all of you for joining us today. Thank you to our superintendent, Mr. James Earl, to our board president, Addie Daniels Lane, our board vice president, Yolanda Manero Lopez, and all of our board members. We just thank you all for tuning in to Trenton TV Radio on Trenton Talks, WIMG 1300 and Verizon Channel 28. Everyone have a great evening. God bless everyone.
Thank you.